Hey guys, Tom Sampson with Clutch.net here. We're going to take a look at a pretty common skill check that is given to senior analysts that wants to see if you can use Power BI alone in order to achieve some pretty difficult measures. We're going to go through one in particular that's called the Diabolical Test today. Let's get to it. Okay, so the report request is for a year-month summarized report that shows a distinct customer count by year-month, along with a percentage of those who purchased again in 90 days of first purchase or in following 3 months. So as an experienced analyst, the first thing that should come to mind when you see a requirement like this is that it's not very clear. So the first thing you need to do is to seek some clarification on what does 90 days of first purchase and following 3 months mean exactly. So in seeking that clarification, the report requester in their words stated, did they buy something during the 90 days immediately following their first purchase? And so I've replied back to the report requester and received further clarification that so if the customer made their first and second purchase on the same day and did a third purchase 4 months later, the customer would then not qualify because the customer did not buy something within 90 days immediately following their first purchase, meaning their first purchase date. So in this case, the customer's second purchase was on the same day and therefore doesn't count. So our pivot requirements for this one is number one, get that first order date, and then the next order date that is not on the same day. All right, great. Clarification for following 3 months. So in the report requester's words, if a customer's first purchase was in July, I want to know whether the customer bought again in August, September, or October. If they bought twice in July, that doesn't count. We only look for whether he came back between August and October, and his first purchase date doesn't matter at all except for the month. So July 1st purchasers and July 31st purchasers are exactly the same for this one. That is pretty clear. I did not need to ask any further questions on that requirement. So our additional pivot requirements for this one is to have another column that shows the order date preceding the first order date that is not in the same month. So two very similar requirements, both using the same pivot of customer and order date. So what we're going to do next is create a pivot table from the sales source that gives us a distinct key for customer ID and order date, and then we're going to do a dense rank over those, and I'll show you exactly what I mean here next. Okay, let's take a look at what was provided as part of this test. We have a workbook here, an Excel workbook that has multiple spreadsheets within it, including sales, product category, and customers. For the measures that we have, we don't need the entire sales table here, but only a portion of it, because we're really only focused on a summary pivot of based on the customer key and the order date. And we're going to dense rank those in order to sort out the order dates based on the customer purchases so that we can figure out the measures that we need, which are, again, 90 days of first purchase and following 3 months. Let's get over to Power BI and knock this out. Okay, here we have a brand new Power BI desktop file opened up. Let's get started. Click on that Transform Data button here, and let's enter some data. Let's call this SalesPivot. And let's get right to that advanced editor, because as advanced analysts, we really don't mess around too much with that draggy droppy stuff. Let's get right down to coding this. So we don't need this. Now, to save some time, I have typed this out and documented this. You'll find this in the link below, along with all of the other materials for this particular test, and also files that are part of our greater demo that will use this data later on to do some other cool stuff with. But anyway, let's take a look here at what we're doing. So the first thing we're doing is we're going to grab our workbook here, which was the Excel spreadsheet provided from the appropriate directory. We're then going to do our standard promote headers. And the next thing we're going to do is we need to add a date key column based on the order date. So in other words, for all of your date and time keys as a senior analyst, you should be taking these dates and times and converting them into an integer format wherever possible. Same goes for really any key field. If possible, you want to get those into integer format. So I won't get into the way you convert a date into an integer format. That should be already familiar to you. If it's not, put a comment down below. I can do a tutorial on that alone, but for now, the conversion is provided for you right here. So the next thing we want to do is we want to ensure that the customer key and date key are in text format initially, because we're going to concatenate these two. The reason we're going to concatenate the customer key and the date key is that we need a key field to sort by, but also we need a compound key if later on we're going to take our SalesPivot table and we're going to relate this to the sales table. This compound key will need to exist on both sides in order to make that relationship. So compound keys, again, this should be something familiar to you if you are taking a test like this. If it's not, if you want to know more about compound keys, comment below and I'll do a tutorial on that gladly. So the next thing we want to do is we want to add a customer date key by concatenating the two. Now that they're in text forms, we can simply concatenate those two together. And then in the end, we want to convert everything to what it should be as we're going to use them in our upcoming measures and calculated columns. And that is the customer key, the date key, both being an integer type and the order date being a date type. And then the last thing we want to do is get rid of all of those columns that we're not going to need. So everything that's in that spreadsheet here, looking back here, the sales order number and the line number, all these are on that list here. Getting this information easily out of here, you should know how to be able to grab this information out and paste it into your editor. It's all pretty basic stuff. Again, if you want to know some shortcuts for doing anything having to do with editing, my personal favorite editor for Power Query M files is Notepad++. I have customized my own color format here so that in editing and working with these files is very easy for me, because as you know, for editing Power Query M files, specifically in Power BI, it's not a feature-rich editor. So it's not going to give you a whole lot of features that you're used to if you're using Visual Studio Code or Notepad++, etc. So anyway, let's get back here. So now that we've removed all of those fields that we don't need, then the next thing we want to do is we want to only keep a distinct copy of the customer key combined with the date key. So in other words, if we go back here and look at this spreadsheet and we sort this by customer and order, what we're going to see is a lot of customers that have a lot of different order line numbers. They may have 10 different line numbers. You don't need inflation in your customer date key. And so you really need to get a distinct list, because when we bring it over, there's going to be a lot of inflation, a lot of duplicate keys, and we don't want any duplicate keys. So we're going to get a distinct set of customer key and order date. And then the last thing we want to do is just simply reorder things in a way that makes sense visually to look at them, which will be the customer key, the order date, and then our new compound key, the customer date key. Click done. Wait a second, and there you go. Great. Okay, so we've got the first table here that we need. The next one we're going to need is we're going to need our calendar. So let's click enter data here, type in calendar. Now, you probably already have a favorite calendar that you use. If you don't, we have a great one at clutch.net that we're always adding new features onto. You're welcome to use that, and we're going to use that for this particular example here. So click on Advanced Editor here, get rid of that, it's in there, and head over to our repository and grab yourself a copy of our calendar. So you went to our repository at the link below and grabbed our calendar. This is what you'll have. Now, this is a configurable calendar that creates a data range based on a source table and columns. So we're going to base ours on the SalesPivot there and the order date. And build out our calendar. Terrific. We've got our two tables in here ready to go. Let's close and apply this. Give that a minute. All right. Terrific. Now let's get over here, make our first relationship. SalesPivot, this is our fact table. So let's put it down below here where it belongs. It looks like it automatically found our key field, which is the integer version of our date, which is absolutely what we want. This looks great. Now we are ready to go on to the next step, which is going to be adding and updating our two tables here. So the first thing we want to do is, now that we've got a sales pivot table here that's got our customer key and our order date key, and now we've got this customer date key, which is again a concatenation of the customer key and the date key. And so if we sort by this, what we're going to see is, here is the first customer. Here are their first orders. They have 3 here. Here's the next customer. Also 3 orders right here. And these are the dates here of those orders. Let's get this in a format that's way easier to look at. There we go. Okay, terrific. So now what we want to do is we want to end up with a single row that's got dates pivoted out according to our definitions that we talked about when we were looking at the PowerPoint slide. And we're going to get into that next. Okay, now that we've got our sales pivot table set up, we are ready to add our dense rank that we were talking about that would reset for each customer key and give us a rank by order date, which what we plan to see here is something like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, repeating until a customer comes along that doesn't have 3 orders. I think it eventually happens maybe a few pages down. But let's get that in here. Now, to save time, I've typed these ahead of time to try to keep the video a little shorter. So the first thing we've got is our customer rank by the customer key, resetting each time a new customer key comes along, ranking by order date. So let's apply that, and we get our expected result, our 1, 2, 3s here down, and eventually we do see customers come along that have only 2 orders, 1 order, 17 orders, or order dates, excuse me, because remember, we are focused only on the order dates and not the order numbers. So it's important to keep it in your head that only the order dates matter for the measures that we have been tasked to provide. So that's the first one. Let's add the next column, which is going to be, we want to take the order for the first measure, that the first order that comes along according to the rank that is not equal to the first order date, and we want to pivot that out and put it here in this particular column. We're going to call this order date after first date here. So what we're doing is basically crawling through the ranks, grabbing that first order date that does not equal the first. The other thing we're doing is, because we're only going to be using this rank 1 row here, we need not put any dates onto other rows. So we're only going to be putting on the rank 1 our order date after the first date. That's the first one. Okay, let's get that into a easier to look at format here. So now what we see here is that the first order here was on 7/22/2001, and the next order date was in 2003 on 7/22, and we see that this qualifies as the date here that will be the first order date after the first date, and so on and so forth. It goes. So let's get the next column in here, which is going to be a very similar measure, except and instead of the date, we're going to be taking the month and the year from the date, but it's essentially very, very similar here. So let's get this in here. And here we have the order date after the first month. And again, we're crawling through the ranks looking for the first date after the original that does not have the same year and month. Okay. Got it. Let's again get this formatted to where it's a little nicer to look at. And what we see in our results down here, and I don't know that a lot of times we'll see these as both the same, because a lot of these, they are going to indeed be the same date. Without spending too much time on it, maybe we can spot one here that's different, but it will be apparent when we do our calculations where we are counting these up and doing our measures a little bit further down the road. That will become apparent. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to create some flags here. The first flag that we need to get is the flag whether or not that is within 90 days. So what we're going to do is another calculated column that needs to put a 1 here if the difference between the order date and the order date after the first days is within 90 days. So let's put that column in here. Again, we're checking. We only want to put this on the line where there is the rank equals 1. We don't need to be concerned with the other rows. We're going to be hiding those later. But for right now, we want to check and see if the date difference between these two, of course, excluding blanks, is within 90 days or not. And that will give us a flag here. So we can scroll down a bit and we see here's a flag here that shows us that from 2003, 9/24, and then a little less than or a little more than 2 months later, there was a purchase here. So sure enough, that one qualifies here to be within 90 days there. Okay, great. Now, the next flag that we want, and the last one we're going to need before we start making the measures, is going to be checking whether it's within 3 months. Now, one of the things that you need to do here in a measure like this, where you are looking at the month and the year portion, is you need to be able to contend with, let's say, a date at the end of the year, like in November or something, rolling over to the next year. I'm not going to get too much into that for the sake of this video. If you'd like to see more about that, please comment below. Gladly get into lots of different measures that deal with dates in this manner, especially in this way where we're choosing portions of date. But for the sake of this, I'm just going to paste this in here and give you a brief description of it. So again, we're evaluating the month date between the two to see if within 3 months of the order date, if our order date after first month is within the 3 months, then we will get a flag over here. Okay, and of course, again, excluding the blanks and only wanting to put this flag on the row that has the rank 1. So here we go down and we can see here that that this qualifies, this date here again qualifies for both. It is both within 90 days and 3 months. Let's see if we can find one that's different. Okay, here's one. You can see that the order date after the first date is it is just beyond, it's 10 days beyond the 90 days. So it doesn't qualify here, but it is qualified here as being within the following 3 months right there. Okay, so now we have the flags that we need in order to do our calculation. And remember that the calculations that we need next are by year month. We need to get a distinct count of the customer keys, and we also need to get a count of each of these flags, and then we need to get a percentage, and then we are as good as done. So now let's move along to the next part of this, which is going to be creating the measures. Okay, we're ready for the final stage. Now, there's a few things that we have to do before we start creating our measures. The first of which is to hide the non-rank 1 rows. So that's easy to do. Just on the drop down here, just unselect everything and just click the 1 right here, and that will reduce the model here, the table, rather, down to only the rank 1, the first row here. Okay, another little thing that you need to do, because we're going to be using a field from the calendar, a text field that is called year month. We need to set the sort on that column to use the date version of it. So let's go over to our calendar here and let's find that year month, or I'm sorry, month year right here, where it's just text typed out here like July 7th. And you can see over here that there is a date version of that over here. you just need to click here, and you need to pick your sort by column as being a month, year, date, which already was selected in this particular case, but just make sure that that is in place. With that, you're able to now go over and start creating the measures that you'll need in order to complete this report or test, we should call it. Okay, the first thing we need to do is we need to get a distinct customer count, because that's going to be the basis upon which we want to do our other calculations ultimately to get the two percentages that we need. So let's go ahead and just for now, let's grab our month year here and drag it over here. Let's put it in there. All right, looking good. Maybe we can change the font here so that we let's pick one that's a little smaller, so hopefully it fits on the same screen. That's better. That's going to make it fit. Then looking for something. It's still a little shy, but there we go. A little small, but anyway, it fits. All right, great. So we've got our month year here, and looking at it, it's in the right order. Again, it's month and year, so January 2001, February, and so forth down through July 2004. So it's good. We know we've got our calendar ready to go here. Now we're ready to start making some measures here and sales pivot table. So the first thing we want to do is to get a distinct customer count. So let's go ahead and create that new measure. And simply just do a distinct count of the customer key here. Again, just a safety measure in case we did not do the previous step where we isolated the customer rank 1. Good idea to just go ahead and add that in here as well. There. Okay, we'll want this to live in the sales pivot. That's fine. Let's put a comment in there for this guy. Okay, looking good. That's going to be a whole number. Okay, so far that's what we need. Let's go ahead and add that in here. Now what we have is for each of these, drop this down a bit. There we go. Okay, so now we have our distinct customer account, which is these are the first two requirements of it. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to get a count of those flags that we made earlier as a calculated column. So the next thing we're going to do is let's count up the flags that are within 90 days. So let's go ahead and make a new measure for that. Again, all of these measures are going to be in the GitHub repository. All of these files, they'll be linked down below. You'll have access to this Power BI report, the raw DAX, the Power Query M. Pretty much everything is broken down for you so that you can either utilize this in projects that you're working on, or if you have questions, you can put them below, and I'd be happy to help you solve your next challenge. Okay, so here we're doing the same thing. We're just basically summing up those flags here. Again, making sure, just a safety precaution, where that sales pivot rank is equal to 1. Now we need to do the same thing for the 3-month here. Okay, same thing. We're just counting the flag, that 3-month flag up. Okay, looking good. And now we need to do a percentage. It's simply that count divided by this number here, which is our distinct. It's going to give us the numbers that we need. So let's add the next new measure here. call that percent returned in 90 days. Let's make that a percent here. Make sure that that lives here in the sales pivot table. Sometimes when you create measures like this, it it can put them in odd places. Okay, the next thing here is the returned in 90 days. Last measure here. There we go. Percent returned in 3 months. I'm sorry, 3 months. We've got the 90 days. We need 3 months. Same thing. It's just taking account of those flags that we made earlier, and dividing that by the distinct count here, making sure, just in case we forgot to hide the other pivots rows, that we're not using that. And let's then take these two here, the 90 days and the 3 month, and drop that in here. And with that, let's get over here and get this guy cleaned up a bit here. Okay, terrific. With that, we're done. We have correctly solved the diabolical test with the parameters that were provided. Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed solving the diabolical test as much as I did. I do want to point out that early on, I struggled with this a little bit because of the definition that I was provided. In particular, the definition for the 90-day measure. The way it was stated, it sounded as if the customer returning within 90 days following the initial purchase date. And therefore, that range would have been 91 days instead of 90. But when I was given feedback, I was given a hint, a correct calculation. I realized that the measure definition that was provided did not match verbatim with the way we had interpreted and created it. So this is a great lesson to you. The customer is always right. And so if the customer gives you a correct output, you need to take that and work toward it as best as you possibly can. Thanks again for watching. Like and subscribe. If you'd like to see more of these, comment below, reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Have a great day.